with this year of mercy, I'm finding that the word mercy is starting to lose meaning. I'm hearing it so often. Year of mercy. Today, Divine Mercy Sunday. We're regularly preaching about mercy, and it's mercy this, mercy that. And it's starting to become just a word. We hear the word grace as well in the church. And I think so often we just hear the word grace, and it's another religious word that we hear, and we kind of skip over it as if it's just more words. And we forget that the depth and the power and the meaning behind these words. It's almost like living in a beautiful, having a beautiful countryside outside your window, and because you're living there, you cease to see the just tremendous beauty of what's before you. Or maybe for husbands and wives, you've been living with them so long, it's just him. Or that's her again. And we stop seeing this amazing person that we've given our lives to. So I just want to hopefully help us to think again and to refresh ourselves on what it is we mean when we speak about mercy. If you watch TV or the cinema, mercy is usually connected to somebody kneeling on the ground before someone with a gun, and they're begging for mercy. And usually the response we're thinking is they've got no chance. And the only mercy they might get is the guy with the gun saying, well, okay, I'll be merciful to you, I'll give you a quick death. And that's mercy. Other images of mercy we might take, the one I thought of just recently was a shower. Except our image of shower might be a shower with the taps that don't particularly work very well. And when they do work, the water that comes out of that shower of mercy is pitifully small and dirty. I've met many people, especially those who've maybe been away from the church for a while, who've said that they've even been coming to church has been something they were afraid to do because they didn't feel they deserved God, deserved to be forgiven, deserved to be there. You'll have friends who will say to you, well, if I went into the church, I'd be burnt to a crisp. You know, I've heard that several times from people. And the reality is, it's pointing to something deep within themselves, that they don't feel that they are loved by God, or for however they've been living their lives, that they don't feel they'd actually receive any mercy from God. They'll just be burnt up. There's a story of a soldier who, in the times of Napoleon, fled. He went AWOL from Napoleon's army, but was caught very quickly. And of course, at those times, and I think still today, if you desert, the punishment is death. This man's mother heard about what had happened and went to Napoleon and pled for him. Be merciful to my son, she said to Napoleon. Have mercy on him. Whereupon Napoleon replied, your son doesn't deserve mercy. And she said, if he deserved it, it wouldn't be mercy. I want to take out I was looking on the internet for some definitions from dictionaries of mercy. Here is one. Mercy. Compassion leads you to have mercy, which is like forgiveness. If you have mercy on someone, you let them off the hook or are kind to them somehow, which reflects back on that little story. Another one, kindness that makes you forgive someone, usually someone you have authority over. So forgiveness, again, is being included in mercy. Another one again, compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is within one's power to punish or harm. An event to be grateful for because it prevents something unpleasant or provides relief from suffering. Performed out of a desire to relieve suffering. And so we have compassion as part of mercy. Very unlike Napoleon, where there was no compassion at all, or the gunman. The Catholic Encyclopedia says that virtue is it's a virtue influencing one's will to have compassion for, and if possible, to alleviate another's fortune. And then it goes on to say something which I thought was really wonderful. And it speaks about St. Thomas Aquinas. And what St. Thomas says about mercy is that it is the spontaneous product of charity. It is the spontaneous product of charity, spontaneous product of love. So I want to remind you of something that you all know, but which we all need to hear over and over again. God is, yes, love. Say it again. God is, all he does is, only folk here are saying this. I want to hear you say love. God is, love. And you at the back, God is, love. All he does is love. When God created, he created for love. You have been created in love. You might not think it, but you are loved by God. Passionately. How do I know you are loved by God? Because you're sitting there. Not because you're sitting in this church and therefore you're loved by God, but because you exist. Because you exist, you are loved. Because God created you to love you. Whom shall I love? I shall create you and love you. And God created the universe out of love for you. He created Adam and Eve out of love. And mercy is a spontaneous product of love. Adam and Eve fell from grace. They rejected love. And then God thought for a very long time, what am I going to do about Adam and Eve? Shall I do something, or shall I just leave them in their suffering and death? That isn't spontaneous. That's not spontaneous. When Adam and Eve fell, God spontaneously, out of love, sought to change the situation, to alleviate their suffering. Because Adam and Eve sinned, death came into the world, suffering came into the world. That is the just product of their sin. That's justice. But God loves Adam and Eve. He loves you. He loves his people. And so immediately, mercy sprang from love, and we have the Lord setting up his plan for redemption, to redeem his people. He forms a people, and this people that he forms kept deserting him, abandoning him, but every time they cried out and asked for his help, love sprang into action through mercy, and he rescued them time and time again. He freed them from Pharaoh and slavery in Egypt because his loving mercy demanded it spontaneously. Every time his people abandoned him to search for other gods and to worship other gods, and they turned back to him after their oppression, he rescued them because his loving mercy demanded it. It's spontaneous. And in the fullness of time, to remedy the actions of Adam and Eve. Love, in its mercy, comes amongst us. To alleviate the suffering we experience in hunger, love, in its mercy, feeds us. In our sickness, in our infirmity, he heals us. In our enslavement, he frees us. That is mercy. Jesus didn't have to think about whether he would heal somebody or whether he'd feed somebody. He loves, and therefore he fed. He loves, therefore he heals. He loves, therefore he frees. That is mercy in action. And because of his love, he lays down his life. Jesus dies and rises again. His death brought an end to the power of sin and death. And yet, we still experience sin and death, do we not? We still experience suffering, do we not? Because Jesus has risen and is no longer walking with us, does that mean that he is no longer acting? Well, you know the answer to that already. Mercy is a spontaneous product of love. And you are loved. And God does not wish to abandon you to your suffering, especially through the suffering of sin, which kills us. And so we hear in the gospel, Jesus giving the apostles that power to forgive. Whosever sin you forgive, they are forgiven. Whosever sins you are attained, they are attained. Why? Because the Father sent Jesus to forgive sins. And so Jesus is sending the apostles. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you to forgive. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you. And so as love spontaneously acts in mercy and comes to relieve us of our suffering, love and mercy continue to act through the church. And so in the Acts of the Apostles, we have all these people being healed, all their suffering being alleviated, just as when Jesus was alive, and even greater, because people were coming to they just wanted the shadow of Peter to fall upon them. You don't hear that in the Gospels. You don't hear people wanting Jesus' shadow to fall on them, to be healed, and yet this is what happened with Peter. So love continues to act in mercy now. Miracles that happened then continue to happen now through the church, because there is still suffering, there is still sin. The mercy, because you are loved, the mercy of God is there for us to receive. The problem is, a lot of the time, we don't believe it, as I said beforehand, because we don't believe that we are loved. The truth is that you are loved. And God's mercy is waiting for us. All we have to do is reach out and touch it. Reach out for it. The taps aren't broken. They work perfectly. The water is not dirty and will not come out in a little dribble. I want you to imagine something for me. Can you imagine being at the bottom of the ocean? Picture being at the bottom of the ocean, looking up, and see the fish swimming above you. Can you do that? And maybe a whale or two. Okay? In fact, don't put yourself at the bottom. Put yourself underneath the ocean, looking up towards it. So you're dry, and the whole ocean is above you. Can you see that? That's the mercy of God. It's not a shower. It's an ocean. And for that, to receive that, all we need to do is reach out to touch it. And when we reach out for it, to touch it, the ocean opens up and we are flooded. We should never be afraid of turning to God for mercy. How much does He love us? Infinitely. How much mercy will He show us? An ocean, infinite.